Good morning, everybody. Before we start today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we're all gathered on here today. It's a very special place, Kurilpa, meaning the place of the water rat. It's a very important place of what we call the dreaming story for Kuril, the native water rat. And it's a very important place traditionally for Belgian people who came here throughout time, and also on the sort of edge of Brisbane City as well. So it's been a very important place throughout history for Aboriginal people. Welcome to the gallery and to the 21st Century exhibition. Today it's my pleasure to introduce Brook Andrew, one of the artists featured in the exhibition. I'm Bruce McLean, the Associate Curator of Indigenous Australian Art here at the gallery, Queensland Gallery and Gallery Art. Today Brook will talk to us a little bit about his work here, which a lot of you are now sitting on, including the two beanbag type sculptures and all the deck chairs and side tables. Today we'll be doing a little bit of a question and answer type of session, so I hope you enjoy, and there'll be time for questions and things at the end of the question and answer. So I'd just like to start by, well, firstly, could everyone just welcome Brook to the gallery? Thank you. Firstly, Brook, I'd just like to ask you to explain a little bit about why you started making art and what drove you to sort of get involved in making art.
Well, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? I think that I suppose that seeing things a bit differently. I think that we all have our own perspective on life, and I've always kind of wanted to engage and kind of maybe flip things a little bit and challenge boundaries and borders and especially language. And I'm quite interested in the way in which we engage in the world. So having an Aboriginal mother and a Scottish-Irish father, it's kind of, we're always kind of engaging differently and boundaries are always shifting. So that was something, I suppose, that influenced me from a very early life. But also, I think, the language of creativity is vast, and I was just manoeuvred somehow into the creative arts. But I did start by studying marine biology and then left and went into the arts.
So how did you make the switch from marine biology into art?
Well, I think it was maybe a fear of sharks.
And your work, you work across many different mediums and in many different ways. Is there a particular thing that drives your art practice? It's quite conceptual, but is there any one underlying current to what you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's about perception. It's about how we see and kind of how we're surprised about difference. It's something that has always been an underlying character, and also conflict, not necessarily in just war style of conflict, but conflict as far as difference is concerned. It could be, a clash of colours. It could be, the way in which that we subvert the deck chair, and who decides to sit on what, a portrait or or a pattern, and also, I suppose, how I engage with contemporary society. And I think that we're quite bombarded by the visual image, by media, the way in which that we live our lives. I think there's quite a lot of pressure in this first world privileged society that we do live in compared to other societies that live around the world. So I'm very interested in difference and how we perceive and how, so it's like, it's kind of the boundaries and opposites, etc. And that kind of drives my work into very different mediums. So these ideas that I have may manifest in something different, or like in this case, I was called up by the gallery staff here and was given the challenge of creating a new commission for this space with deck chairs. And so it definitely is a collaborative experience sometimes, or sometimes one idea might lead onto another idea. But I'm very interested in the public space and then how we interact.
The works, and we started to talk a little bit about the work itself. You often use the sort of abstract designs. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and what that represents?
Absolutely. This is a very important design. It's a traditional design from Wiradjuri country, which is my mother's family. Her father's family is Ngunnawal, but we take the matriarch in our family. And so this is a pattern that you may actually see in other parts of Australia as well. I mean, it's a very kind of important design for different people in different places. But from where I'm from, they are on shields, so they're clan design, and they're on shields, and they're also on trees. So these are representation of tree stumps. And I came in more contact with these designs in museums than in my own family, because of course, like many Aboriginal families who are removed from culture and tradition, they're kind of important objects are normally in museums or private collections, depending on your experience. Of course, there are some trees that still exist in the landscape, very special. But it's really my work in museums over the last 15, 20 years. I've travelled to different museums in different parts of the world, and often kind of investigate the kind of material that they have. And so that pattern really inspired me to bring that into a contemporary world and how we live in that in today's society, but also because it's a very optical, hypnotic pattern. And I'm absolutely interested in capitalism and hypnotism and the kind of particular privileged life we're supposed to be living. And when I mean that, it's not that I'm an anti-capitalist or any of that kind of crazy stuff. But I'm absolutely interested in the way in which that our lives are composed. Who composes our lives? Do we really think we're composing our lives? Or is it someone else who's actually in power? So this pattern kind of resonates with other meaning as well. But here, of course, the two trees mark out a ceremonial or kind of memorial place. It's called Ancestral worship. And there are 6 portraits on the mixed up with the chairs, and these are 6 portraits from 6 different countries around the world from the early 1900s. These images are from postcards, and I've been collecting postcards for many years.
You've used the design in lots of different things: the tree stumps, the deck chairs, jumping castles, and also I've got a hoodie at home that's printed in it as well, and jumper. Is there any sort of special reason why you've chosen to reproduce that into a number of different services?
Yeah, good question. I've actually been saying lately, where is the end? The interesting thing for me emotionally, and I suppose subconsciously, about this pattern is that it's very much a part of how I see the world. So it's a bit like, Neo in The Matrix, and how there's that's everywhere. And so I've always done these drawings of being in spaces where we're actually surrounded by these patterns. So the way we see, it's a metaphor for how we see. So, we will walk around and we have our own perspective on the world, and that's how we see. And that's the way in which that our morals and our standards and our perceptions of other people, that is how we see. And sometimes that's challenged and sometimes it's not. So for the pattern for me is really about how I see. It's the kind of the veil, I suppose, that comes out. It has its own rhythm, so to speak. So it kind of controls me in a way. I think that artists say funny things. It might kind of sound weird to say that, but emotionally, it has its own force. So I know when I can't do something. I know when I can do something with it, because it is an absolutely very special. Culturally, it's very important. And so this is a gathering. It's almost like I suppose the whole 21st century is arguably a jumbo corroboree for the concept, and so that's why I used it here, because it is about creating a space where people can come together. And the pattern, maybe when I think that the world isn't so hypnotic, I might stop using it. But for now, it's going on.
And you touched a little bit on the images reproduced during times of that, some of them at least, on some of the deck chairs. I know that another facet of your work represents a lot of historical images. Can you talk a little bit about why that's such an important thing for you to do through your work?
Absolutely. I think I first came across an image at the Mitchell Library back in 1995 of a man from Barwon River in Queensland, and that was quite a shock for me and also my family. And some people's families are very lucky if they have old photos, but not all families have old photos, and in some cultures those old photos actually are owned by other cultures who have exoticized them. So there's this kind of complexity of the gaze, and as in G-A-Z-E, the way we look, and I'm very interested in that space that's in between and the invisibility of that. I'm also interested in what's remembered, or who's remembered and who's not remembered. So I've been collecting postcards, images of portraits, and also travelling around the world to different museums looking at these photographs for a long time. I like to familiarise, I suppose, the ideas that happen in regards to memorials in other countries. If you go to Auschwitz or Birkenau, you have these incredibly painful sites of massacre, and you walk into these places which have been transformed into museums, and there are thousands of portraits of people who were massacred. And also in the Killing Fields Museum in Cambodia. There are many other sites of this kind of significance, and there are artists around the world who deal with these important issues of remembering and memorial. And so the way I started to kind of think about that in regards to our country and how we remember or don't memorialise, it's not only about pain for Aboriginal people or other people, or guilt, it's about what people do want to remember or they don't want to remember. And I think that there is a massive space where it's invisible, it doesn't exist. And so I've often had conversations with my cousins who run the Young Land Council, and they own they're custodian to the important site of the Cootamundra Girls' School there, and that's being rented out to an Aboriginal Anglican organisation. And I said, look, you should turn this girls, this kind of training for girls into a museum. And they didn't want to, obviously, for the particular reason. But I think what I'm talking about is that there are much broader impacts in the way we see or the way we remember. So for me, I'm incredibly passionate about the visibility of people who, it's such a different world away if we think about how we engage in culture and society and history today. So for me to create 6 different portraits from people from other places in this installation was a departure for me in regards to including people from other lands.
So in the installation, there's the design and the 6 different images of people from other places, and when that all comes together, what is the sort of overall intent of the artwork?
I should ask people out here, but it's a conversation. It's called Ancestral Worship. It's a very important place, I think. And actually, when I was forming this and having conversations with people here in regards to the installation, I was in Beijing and I was in some important places of ancestral worship there, actually, and I was walking through some of those important sites and the significance and how different cultures really remember. It's like they invest so much time and energy and respect into remembering. And I kept seeing ancestor everywhere and worship everywhere. And I remember texting Don Heron and saying, look, it's got to be called ancestral worship. And so I think that, for people to come here, it's not just sitting down and looking at the beautiful view and the important, dreaming site that's here. It's also about engaging with the presence of the other portraits and remembering those people as well.
And I guess they're important people and important designs printed onto deck chairs.
Yeah.
So having people sit on them, how does that sort of work in your thinking?
Well, I think that's important. It's how we actually engage in the contemporary world. We don't live 200 years ago, we live today. And I think that, everything goes with the times. Absolutely. It's like if you look at the cross and how people have been wearing the cross around their neck, or they see it on t-shirts, or you see it and there's a big neon, or do you know what I mean? I think that there are ancient cultures, or religions that even are only a few thousand years old compared to 50,000, etc. But I think that, there's that kind of hideous Darwinian saying, survival of the fittest. Well, I take a very different perspective on that, and I think that, it's almost like survival of the contemporary or something. Yeah.